Hello, and welcome to the Old Farm Bus Podcast. This is the back of the bus session.
Hello and welcome to the Old Farm Bus, Back of the Bus Sessions podcast. Today I've got an old mate on here I've not seen for years, but he's inspired me on my poetry career, and I'm very much looking forward to diving in with Matt Abbott. That's me going mental, mate, because I know in edit I put a crowd noise in.
Right, fair.
And it brings the energy.
Okay, sounds good.
You've got to picture it now.
Yeah, I've got it.
Screams, the people go mad, confetti, everything.
Sounds all right.
You say you do a radio show.
Yeah.
How's that format? How's that looking?
Oh, it's buzzing. We've been doing it for 2 years now. We started in November 2019, so obviously we had no idea what was around the corner. There's three of us, so I present it with Selena Godden, who's an incredible author and poet, and Emma Rose Abrams, who's an arts journalist. So I do a bit of poetry. Selena does a book roundup, and Rose does arts roundup, and we always have a special guest every month. It's just great. 2 hours of art and culture and activism and just alternative voices, and it's on Soho Radio as well, which is quite an iconic station. So yeah, it's good fun.
I want to go in that path with you, mate, because poetry, that's how we know each other.
Yeah.
That's our meeting point. Now, poetry's subjective.
Yep.
Who is good? What is good? It's all down to the individual.
Yep.
For me, you're very good.
Oh, well, that's very kind of you.
I do. I think it is that vulnerability and being a male, and me watching you on stage, I'm very much like that person. And that's how I value poetry,
Right.
is if I can get in their shoes.
Yeah.
And I can really understand their story.
Yeah.
It's very inclusive, but you've not excluded me in any way because I feel a part of it. I think some poetry nights, and again, that's the subjectivity, is where they've been so inclusive to themselves, they've excluded me out of it. I don't feel a part of that journey anymore.
Yeah, I know what
comparison.
you mean. Yeah,
that's how I feel. So I really enjoy your way of telling your journey. Was it the activism? Was it the mental health side? What drew you into writing your stories out? Deep.
A lot of things. So some good reasons and some bad reasons, really. So I was 17 when I wrote my first poem, and I was a massive fanboy of a band called Reverend of the Makers. I don't know if you remember Anyway Champion of the World, yeah.
Oh, mate, I've seen them at I can't remember what festival it was. Oh, Bearded Theory.
Yeah, that's it. They're really big on festival scene, massive. And I was a massive fanboy just before they got signed, and like, you know, on the day of like music forums and all that, and Arctic Monkeys had just come out, and so I were obsessed with him when I was a teenager, and he used to do little bits of spoken word in between the songs.
Oh,
and
cool.
So I basically copied him to an extent. I was like, oh my god, that's amazing. And then I got into John Cooper Clarke and was like, oh my god. And I really wanted to be in a band. I really wanted to be part of this scene, but I couldn't sing or play guitar. And so suddenly this was a route to get on stage. Now, that sounds ridiculous, but in all honesty, it was the fact that it was accessible, as in you don't need to spend months learning to play guitar or buy an amp or whatever. You don't have to have singing lessons. It's something that I could immediately do. And I really liked that as an art form, it was something that anybody could instantly do. And also, I could write a poem that afternoon and perform it that night. I'm not saying that's a good idea, but as a teenager, it felt really instant. And also, the audience never wanted it or never expected it. So Wakefield had a really good scene at the time, a venue called Escobar, and you could turn up on any Friday or Saturday night on your own, and there'd be a room full of your mates, the band would be great, it was really, really good fun, and they used to get me up doing poetry in between the bands, and everyone would be like, fuck's he doing poems for? But then I'd do the poem and they'd be like, oh, actually alright that, and I just got a kick out of it being so weird. And now a poet at a music festival or at a music gig might not be as weird, but back in 2007 it just wasn't a thing. So I think I just buzzed off that, and then I got the poetry bug, and then I ended up being in a band, and I was a professional musician for like 6 years, and then went back to poetry. So I've had a very weird journey with it, but I'd been performing for about not even 6 months when I did a Love Music Hate Racism gig in Wakefield, and it was at a social club for about 1,000 people there. One of the guys from the Specials was DJing. It was this massive thing, and I was just a kid. I didn't really know what I was doing, and the organisers, I'd asked them if I could get up and do a poem, and they were like, oh god, okay, yeah, sure. And I went up and I did this anti-BMP poem, and the place absolutely went for it, like went wild. And at that moment I was like, okay, I can marry my activism with an art form. And I never really thought that I would be able to be a writer or a performer, because you know, as a working class lad from Wakefield, you're not told like, oh yeah, you could be a poet. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, of course.
And so I'd started on this activism journey, and then suddenly I could use my activism but also exist in this place where I'd always idolised bands, I'd always wanted to be a lyricist, I'd always loved gigs, so I could suddenly be in that space and do my activism as well. So they sort of just fell into each other, if you know what I mean.
I completely know what you mean. That thing you said about feeling weird or you were different at the time,
Yeah.
as it has become more accepted
Yeah.
and in more places, has it taken that glow a little bit when you perform?
That's a really good question. I guess, yeah, in a way, to an extent, it sort of has. Because it was such a weird thing that you'd have a poet on stage at a music gig, or even a political rally. It was such a weird thing. Whereas now people almost half expect there to be a poet on the bill.
Yeah.
So maybe that element of surprise or whatever, but also I think a lot of that was fueled by the fact that I was 17, 18. So I felt like I was like changing the world, when obviously I wasn't. Like, you know, poets have been performing with bands for decades. It's just that it wasn't really a thing in 2007. So it's not like I was a trailblazer, but you sort of get that feeling when you're 17, don't you? But at the same time, because poetry is a lot more accepted, it has opened up. Like some of the gigs that I've done and some of the stages I've been on are phenomenal that I probably wouldn't have been able to do in 2007. So there's a flip side in that a much bigger event would now be like, oh, should we book a poet? Do you know what I mean? So
yeah.
It works both ways, really. I can't complain.
Open doors for the people. I think for me, I really resonate with what you're saying. I loved going to gigs, especially in this area where sort of EDL, BNP, very ripe.
Yeah.
And forming Is Immigration Killing the Nation?
Yeah.
And genuinely, I got punched once after a gig. But say it, and not just saying it to nodding heads to people that might be against that and make them think. And when you say something to the level of, we're on a rock hurtling through infinite space,
Yeah.
it's hard to disagree with, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
And saying that to certain people, I feel really proud in that. And my favourite moments after a gig is, I fucking hate poetry, but I like that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I'm
That's
sure
what-
you've had
yeah.
that a lot. But again, because people half expect it,
Yeah.
I suppose it has lost that element of surprise. And I've felt it in certain areas. Oh, there's a poet on, here we go again. But I suppose that is just for the poet then to take that energy and go, no, I'm going to give you something a little bit different today. And you can be quite... Music, I love music to the core.
Yeah.
But the special thing with poetry is about being able to stop and
Yeah.
shout and be very different in your approach to it every time you do that poem.
Yeah, it's also exactly every time you perform a poem, it's different depending on which room you're in
Yeah.
and who's in front of you. And I think as a poet, particularly as an activist poet, it's so tempting to be a crowd pleaser and to perform a left-wing poem at a left-wing event. Like, obviously they're going to lap it up. What's really important is, as you've said, to perform poems that are not necessarily going to chime with the audience's beliefs, that are maybe going to ruffle a few feathers, that are maybe going to be a bit risky. I think it's really important. Sure, it's great to get, like, you know, loads of people at a rally going, yeah, we agree, of course they agree. But if if you're doing something at a music festival or a music gig and you know that it's not a room full of, you know, Labour voters, then maybe not just Labour but Brexit, racism, whatever, that's when it's really important. And as a poet, even doing something at football or whatever, like, it's a really unique opportunity to chat to people. And I think if you are working class, I shouldn't really mention class so much, but if I, as a working class lad from Wakefield who's a lifelong Leeds United fan, do a poem at an event where it's mainly Leeds fans who aren't interested in poetry, and I say something that they might not agree with, they're a lot more likely to take it on board than if it was someone who was very highly educated, who was like upper middle class, who'd never been to a football game. Do you know what I mean? So I think it's important to use where you come from to connect with people who wouldn't connect with poetry. Sorry, I'm waffling a bit, but do you know what I mean?
No,
It's a really
completely,
rare. It's a really rare thing.
I think that's the beauty of, you know, social media. It gets a lot of bad rep.
Yeah.
But with our YouTube channels and Spotify now, you can put it into there. It's in the ether so much that it is that accessibility. And people are coming round going,
Yeah.
oh, so that's basically just telling your story.
Yeah, yeah.
I've got loads of stuff to say. And I suppose the thing with doing poetry, it's doing it in a creative way where you get to own that story a little bit more, rather than going on a station and saying, this happened to me, and then this, and I feel mad about this, and this is injustice here. To take that concept, sit with it, channel it, and put it into something very artsy, owns it a little bit more so.
Yeah, absolutely.
I like that accessibility with people at the minute. I've in the strangest of places, you must get this all the time, but your old footy mates back in the day, and you're still playing 11 aside now, and I do a little bit, but ACL problems. But I go down and they're like, Mikey, what do you think to this? And I've gone, I just didn't expect it from you, but I bloody love it.
Yeah.
It's really warming to see people channeling in that way.
Yeah, it's good.
Can we go back then in time?
Yeah.
Go back in time to Matt as a young person, because for that thirst for activism and gone on the path you did at 17, you found poetry. Can I find out a bit like what your household was like? Was it sort of full of music? Love in the house and sort of everybody together channeling activism, or did you stem from a bit of a outright outlandish area?
My mum and dad are both politically engaged, but they're not activists. I tell you what it is. Basically, I come from a very loving household. I'm very, very fortunate. I had a very nice upbringing. Like I can't, when I was 16. I started studying government and politics at A level, and like the thing is with me, I always wear my heart on my sleeve, and I like to be very outspoken, and I'm very passionate, and it's sort of like all or nothing. So like, I was never satisfied with being a Leeds United fan. I wanted to be the biggest Leeds United fan that Leeds United had ever known. Like, I'd always go to extremes, and so I started studying politics, and my natural inclination, you would think, would be to vote Labour, but at the time, Tony Blair had just won his third term. There was loads of stuff going on in Iraq and Afghanistan, and a lot of people really hated Tony Blair. And so, without the Labour Party as an obvious home, and knowing what the Tories were like, I very foolishly nearly got hoodwinked by the BNP. I actually fell in with the BNP. I never actually went to a meeting. I never went to a rally. I was never face to face with any BNP activists, but I sort of fell for the message that they were sticking up for working class people, that they were a genuine working class voice in Parliament, and they were pushing a lot of issues like renationalising the railway, reforming social care, like a lot of respectable policies, right? And obviously now as an adult I realise how horrific they are / were, but as a 16-year-old who wanted something to latch onto, who liked playing devil's advocate, I sort of allowed myself to believe that they were a legitimate option.
Was that sort of conditioning told to you as well, or is it just something you studied down the line and thought, this makes the most sense to me at this time?
It's not like I obviously didn't extensively study, because if I did, then I would have realised what they were. The problem is, you go on the website, it doesn't say we hate brown people, we hate black people, we hate gay people. It doesn't say that. It just says like British jobs for British workers, which at the time I thought was a fair enough point. And I basically just got hoodwinked by their respectable headlines. And at the time, Margaret Hodge, who still is a Labour MP, she said that when she was knocking on the door in Barking, 80% of white families admitted that they were tempted by the BNP. And there was loads of stuff that made it look like they were on the rise as a genuine electoral force.
Yeah.
And so as a 16-year-old, obviously white privilege allowed me to ignore a few things that I shouldn't have ignored, and I nearly fell in with them. And then within a year or so, I realised how much of a colossal fuck up that was, and how awful that was, and that's what spurred me on to get in touch with Love Music Hate Racism, go on anti-war rallies, and that's where my activism came from. So because I still didn't see the Labour Party as somebody I could get behind, as a party I could get behind, I thought, well, I'll start championing certain causes instead. So speaking specifically about homelessness, specifically about refugee rights, because I couldn't latch on to the Labour Party. So that's why I became an activist, because I needed to be doing something. I needed to put my passion behind it, but they weren't an option. So to be honest, it wasn't. My mum was actually pivotal in making me see sense with the BNP. She'd let me get away with a lot of stuff. She was quite a liberal mum. Like, she knew that I'd done things that maybe a lot of parents wouldn't have let me to do. But when she found out about that, she was like, absolutely no way. Like, she really tore me to pieces, which I have a lot of respect Well, I'm very grateful she did. So that's where it came from, which is not what I don't think a lot of people would expect me to say that, because I've been an anti-racism activist ever since. But I think it's important to be honest about it. So,
do you feel that when you made a mistake, quote unquote, and vehemently went for a path, do you think that's grown you in that moment to see if you can focus and speak in absolutes and say this is a truth, and then spin on a sixpence and go, oh my God, I was so foolish? Was that a big life lesson for you to be able to, throughout life, always live in the nuance and always live in the, oh, I don't need to all be absolute about everything at every moment. I can be a bit grey and think about things all the time and let them evolve.
It's something that I've always tried to do with my poetry. So in my debut show, which is also my debut collection, Two Little Ducks, I'm actually talking about a lot of the reasons why so many working class communities voted leave. I personally didn't vote leave, and I know that a lot of people voted leave for a lot of very ugly reasons.
And abstract.
But a lot of people voted leave for reasons that I understand and empathise with. And so I wanted to write about that nuance because, and it chimes back to what we were saying earlier, this show I was taken to Edinburgh Fringe, and Edinburgh Fringe is a largely white, middle-class, liberal, Guardian audience. A lot of people might slate me for saying that, but it sort of is, right? And I thought, well, there's no point me going up there and going, don't you think Brexit's bad? Because everyone would be like, yes, we do. So I thought I'd go up there and be like, actually, these are all reasons why people voted leave, not just racist knobheads. Like, so I've always tried to use that. The only thing that I'm not nuanced about is hating the Tories. I absolutely despise Tory ideologies and policies. I'm not talking about people or individuals, but what they stand for. That's the only thing I'll never be nuanced about. But other than that, I think it's really important. And like I say, particularly as a working class person who's got a platform, I think presenting certain working class issues and arguments into what is traditionally a more mainstream art form, middle class art form, I think is really important.
Are there ever any moments of Tory conversations where you've had that element of, well, that is something we can take, or we can sculpt and mould to build a system? Because for me, I don't think many systems have ever worked. I don't like the capitalist model. I don't agree with materialism as a whole. I know I've got lots of nice fancy things on here and I've been wrapped in by just mindless consumerism, but I've grown, I've matured, I've got a better side of my psyche, probably helped from having a baby, to be honest. But there are elements where people speak in absolutes. The capitalist model's the only way. No, the socialist model's the only way. And sometimes, that saying socialism doesn't work, and they go, oh, it's not been deployed correctly. And then the others go, well, yeah, but maybe throughout time, this is why. And I just think there's a system that needs to be understood, that it's taken from all the bits that do work of that and that model and this model and that, and we build in small communities and implement what works, but not having to just speak this doesn't work or this doesn't work or this does and this does. Do you know what I mean?
There's no doubt that we live in a capitalist structure, a capitalist society, like in the US and the UK. Like, it is fundamentally capitalist, and I don't think that'll ever change. A lot of socialists will call for a socialist revolution, and that's the only way you'll ever sort it. That's not going to happen, and that's not something I necessarily advocate. The reason why I would like a socialist government is to regulate it. Like, there are elements of capitalism that are good, but when capitalism is allowed to run completely unchecked and unregulated, that's when it becomes really ugly.
There's no trickle down.
No, it's complete bullshit. And if we have a capitalist society where there's, competition amongst businesses and consumerism or whatever, that's fine, but, to an extent. But if the government tries to help out the poorest people, tries to help out the most vulnerable people, whatever, whilst also allowing that to happen, that's fair enough. If a government treats people like that as vermin, as a problem they wish they could get rid of, that's why I campaign against the Tories, basically.
I like it. I'm in. You sold it.
So there's, maybe I understand why some people thought Jeremy Corbyn was too extreme. I personally disagree, but I understand why people thought that. But then at the same time, if you have someone like Keir Starmer, who's basically just effectively centre-right with some of his policies, I don't see the point. Don't see the point.
My way of voting is just literally trying to look at their eyes, get into their soul and go, is that a human on the other end of the line?
Well,
and for me, Corbyn was.
Yeah,
he
totally.
really genuinely cared. The
100%.
way he spoke on a platform wasn't jargon, it wasn't phatic language. He wasn't there as a blank machine going this and this and this and just saying things people want to hear.
Yeah.
He really thought it through and he really meant it. And I vote on hearts, genuinely, but I'm a sensitive bugger. Just out of interest though, with, COVID, I've said the C word, and everything that's unfolded in the last 2 years, have you noticed radical shifts in how people view the world? And sort of the capitalist model, people just signing up to work 9 to 5 days a week, become a machine in essence. I've lost so many friends to this system and fall into it in deep depression, in honesty, and lots of suicide. And I've been there too. I was working in factories and Thorntons and so on. What I've noticed a lot of people do who have lost jobs within these times go, shit, I was doing something I hated and I lost that.
Yeah.
Why not go for something that I absolutely love and throw everything at it? Because if I can lose that, why not put my eggs into that basket? Have you noticed people's mind shifting and becoming more individual rather than just being taken by the corporate machine? Because that is how I see it.
I think everyone in one way or another has been able to press a reset button that never existed, myself included. Not that everyone's been forced to pause and take a breath and reflect on things. Loads of people have got married, had kids, got divorced, moved up country, changed careers. Loads of people have made colossal life decisions that maybe wouldn't have happened without COVID. So there's that. But there's also a proof that it doesn't have to be this way. So if you've done exactly the same job to exactly the same capability from your home, and yet in normal times you're spending 3-4 hours commuting, spending say 20% of your salary on rail fares or whatever, and suddenly you're like, well, I did the same thing at home. What's the problem? So I think it's shown people that there was a certain way that everybody did things just because that's how it was done, and COVID's gone, actually it can work without that. So I think it's the two double-edged prongs. So perhaps a lot of people have gone, actually this is bullshit, I'm going to set up as an entrepreneur, I'm going to go freelance, I'm going to insist that I work from home, blah blah blah. But also just the fact that people have been able to ask big questions and reassess. So I think obviously it's awful, but on the flip side, some people have been plunged into such levels of desperation that they're now being exploited even more. And the fact is that situation as dire as COVID, rich people, ultra rich people, are always going to profit because they'll manipulate it. So bad things have come out of it and good things have come out of it. Either way, whatever was happening before COVID came along was broken, was fucked. It wasn't right.
Yeah.
And maybe as a byproduct of COVID, things might change. And with the environment as well, to be fair, a lot of the ways that companies were operating was so much useless waste, expense, travel, carbon emissions in general. So it's definitely changed things, but we're still in it, man. We're still in it. Do you know what I mean? I'm not on about just the new variant. It's it's still not entirely clear. It was only this time 2 years ago it didn't exist. It's crazy to think that. So I think it's going to be 5, 10, 15 years when we actually see the effects of it. Do you know what I mean?
100%.
Yeah.
I was just trying to picture that with your activism. Has it changed the conversations everyone having? Are they more vehement? Are they more, we need to cause the ruckus now. It's happening now. There's a big shift. Let's really amplify it. Or have you seen different, just more gentle approaches?
It's really hard to say, because part of me wants to say that people in general have got more empathy because we've all been through this shared experience, which I don't think has ever been repeated since the Second World War in terms of something that affected everybody in one way or another. So you'd think that people would be more tolerant and there'd be more empathy, but then at the same time, I spend a lot of time on Twitter.
Yeah. Don't do that, mate.
I know, mate. I know. It's toxic, and it just feels like. So, for example, I'm an obsessive football fan. Racism is getting worse in football.
Really?
And misogyny and transphobia and But it's what I'm seeing on Twitter. This is the thing. It's what I'm seeing on Twitter. Does that reflect real life? When I go to a Leeds United game, have I ever heard a racist chant? No. I've never heard a racist chant. And I've never really heard any racial abuse around me, but you go online and a black player makes a mistake and you see monkey emojis.
Yeah.
So it's really hard to judge, to be honest. But what I think the murder of George Floyd changed things more for me. And obviously that was just after lockdown. It made me question a lot about the fact that I'm a able-bodied white man in a heteronormative relationship. If I'm going to take up a space on a stage or in a book or wherever, I need to think about what I'm saying, because I need to respect that I'm taking up that stage with those privileges, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I do,
and it was something that I'd always be aware of, but I think the murder of George Floyd really, and the Black Lives Matter movement really ramped it up and made everybody think a lot more, particularly because we're in lockdown. It gave you that time of like, okay, if I'm going to say something, why am I saying it and who am I saying it to and what am I saying it for? Do you know what I mean? Made me question it a lot more.
Very reflective on that.
Yeah.
I really like what you're saying there. I mean, again, if it's coming from a place of love, compassion, kindness and self, and it's your true journey, I feel I just want more stages with them presences on, regardless
of course,
whatever. But I would like to see more nights propping up and that feeling of equality, of diversity there, because I have been to way too many gigs and just seeing loads of people like me on stage, and I'm thinking, well, there's an imbalance now, and the George Floyd thing did that to me. It made me think, it made me look at it and reflect. So completely agree with that. And I suppose everything's situational, isn't it? What environment am I in? When I go to a school, I don't try and throw out so much politics and what I'm saying. I just say, well, this is what got me into poetry. This is my story, part of my journey, and here I am.
Yeah.
And I suppose there's that beautiful balance within it, isn't there? Because wherever you go, people really want to throw the political view and verdict at you, and some people just aren't ready for that at times, and it's all about situational context for me and where you are in that moment.
Totally.
But definitely want to go to more nights with angry poets telling it how it is.
Yeah, it feels like it's ripe for it at the moment.
With all this journey we've been on, and we're very in the politics now.
Yeah. I never talk about poetry.
We're smashing into it. We're going. Are you part of a movement? Who do you work with? And like, you're in Leeds now. Do you go for meetups? Do you go and speak to people? Are you out on the streets? How are you putting out your politics? Is it poetry?
To a large, so I do attend certain demos, and I am in contact with groups, so like Anti-Racism Day and like Leeds Against Fascism, like I am, and also like the Orgreave Truth and Justice campaign, but that's more reactive. So like, if I see an event, I'll go to it. If they ask me to speak, I'll speak. That's not so I'm not as proactive in terms of like being out in the community. I did a lot of doorstepping for Labour in the last election, and obviously we took such a battering in the polls that sort of knocked me back a bit, but
yeah, I got pretty cold.
I'm sort of, my writing now is almost entirely, so at the moment I'm writing a novel. I'm about 2.5 years in to writing a novel, and that is at its core talking about what I was talking about earlier with the BNP and stuff. And so I'm using my art a lot. Like, I'd write poems about all sorts of stuff, and some of it was political. Whereas now, like, pretty much everything I do, not everything I do, but a lot of what I will do will be with the intention of having some kind of social conversation. I'm not going to change the world. I'm not going to end racism. I'm not that dickhead. I don't think that. But I sort of think, like, that's what I'm most skilled at. Yeah. If you know what I mean. So, and
it emanates, doesn't it? It's not being that egotistical to think, this, me, I'm going to change it all, but it's a drop in that pond and it ripple effect.
I think you should always ask yourself, have you got something to say? Yeah. What is it that you're saying? Why are you saying it? Who are you saying it to? Why are you saying it now? And like, if you tick all those boxes and you still think it's the right thing to do, then you do it. So that's what I'm doing at the moment. But
it's a great recipe.
It is partly. Well, I did see it on Twitter somewhere. I can't remember who. I don't want to take credit. I can't remember who said it originally. But yeah, like I've only just moved back to Leeds, so I'm still reconnecting with a lot of my political roots. But I've always been connected to the coal mining community. So my dad was a miner, and his dad was a miner, and his dad was a miner. And a lot of people have a go at us sometimes for getting together and commemorating like the miners' strike in 84, 85. But it's through that I went to the Calais jungle to volunteer with refugees. It's the coal mining community gets together, and as well as reminiscing, they say, okay, well, what can we as a community do now? So it's through that I've done a lot of my work with refugees and asylum seekers. So the coal mining community is a constant that I'm always involved in, I think, and the anti-racism movement.
Oh, mate,
Yeah.
Listening to all that, I've got, after this, a few links I'd like to jump around with. We're doing a podcast with refugees at the minute. My sister's a human rights solicitor.
Oh, wow.
And again, my auntie has a refugee charity.
Really?
But yeah, I'd love to talk to you a lot about, because we're going to get people down to come and just share their stories.
Yeah.
That's all it is. But I'd love you to be here and
buzzing.
part of it. That'd be amazing.
That sounds good.
It's definitely a big part of where our heart lies.
Yeah.
My granddad was from Persia.
Really?
Yeah, he came and he was a doctor in the community. It's really interesting because Ripley, being EDL, BNP Central,
Yeah.
they're all very much like, oh, we hate other people, Browns and all that, but we like you because you fix us. And it's such a really interesting concept where I think he was a big shift in consciousness in this area.
Yeah.
Mr. Mullen-Furrows, Dr. Mullen-Furrows.
Brilliant.
But I love that. I never got to meet him. I was only one, well, I did meet him, I suppose, but one when he died.
Right.
But the stories continued.
Yeah.
I'm a Markham, so I've got my dad's name. And my mum's kept Mullen-Furrows because it's got so much history.
Right.
But it was actually really interesting how me and my sister were treated in our community just for our second names, because nobody knew that was my granddad.
Yeah.
So my sister was held up in quite high regard, and people spoke, oh, you're a Mullen-Furrows.
Right.
And I sort of just went under the ropes a bit. And then later on, is that your mum? Oh, right. But we achieved very differently. And to some degree, I don't like to hold my past to me too deeply and become a victim. But I do wonder if it was how people perceived us and treated us in them times. It's very interesting.
Yeah, it is. It's fascinating.
There was a part of this chat where you brought up class system. And then you hesitantly went back, retreated and said, oh, I don't want to bring class into it. What was that feeling?
Well, I mean, it's not as clean cut as it used to be, is it? So, like, the lines are blurred, and a lot of people would probably accuse me of being middle class, or certainly living a middle class lifestyle, like a professional poet. Do you know what I mean? Who owns a house and goes to the theatre. Like, a lot of people, and like, I've got my own car. Like, a lot of people would say traditionally that sounds middle class. But I consider myself working class because of the background I've come from, but like, I realise that I'm in a very... But then it's like, who's to say that working class people can't write poetry and go to the theatre and have a car? Do you know, so basically I'm tripping myself up constantly because it's such a complicated thing. But I say this to my wife all the time because she has a similar issue. Like, we always say to ourselves, like, are we really working class? Are we really working class? Whatever. And then you go to like a theatre event or a poetry event and everyone there is really middle class and you go, okay, no, we are working class.
Yeah. So you're trapped with a bit of guilt there, do you feel, for breaking away from your roots in essence?
It's really complicated because I think naturally as a working class person, you are a lot more likely to have imposter syndrome and like an inferiority complex. And in an art form like poetry that's perceived as being very... I've lost the word. Very like highbrow and very like literary, very like esteemed and very whatever. You sort of made to feel like you don't really belong in that space and you've got to conform to, and so it like you're always made to feel like an outsider, but then at the same time, it's just really complicated.
I completely get it. I feel very confused in my positioning because all my life growing up here, even though it is a very, very, very working class area, I'm going to school and everyone's put me in the middle class bracket because we live on a farm. Yeah. But, you know, everything's got a story to it. And my mum, ruthless as fuck woman, tenacious, ended up, she was a veterinary nurse, and we had a really small holding in Denby, just out of the way, probably an acre and a couple of stables.
Yeah.
And we got this place off basically a cult. We turned up, or my mum turned up, and do you know them adverts where all the horses' hooves are sort of curled up on themselves?
Oh, yeah.
And mud fever, and there was Rat Central. Where we're sitting now was Rat City, I used to call it.
Nice.
But it was a derelict area. This sounds like a horror film of Amityville Horror, but it was two twins that lived in the sheds. They really did. They lived in a static caravan in it's like a barn you see over there. It was a horror movie.
Yeah.
And they got evicted, and then my mum said, "Well, what's happening to the farm?"
Right.
They said, "Oh, it's going on auction." So literally the next week, my mum's there. Bosh, take the farm, but all because of that moment of her tenacity and ruthlessness, and so
Yeah.
we ended up on this amazing space. But I'm going to school. We're in massive debt. My mum's got no money at all.
Yeah, yeah.
It's just constant debt then. But your perception towards everybody else is, oh, the rich kid.
Yeah.
So it's such a mental conundrum because I've got no privileges. I know I've got certain privileges.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
not
But
to what their
social,
extent
financial,
is.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm wearing the same clothing. I'm going in the same situations. But I've had it all my life where I've been to situations and they're treating me in a certain way when I merit none of that. So I do really understand the conundrum
It's weird, isn't it?
of how you feel. And I just think what it is, and I love this saying, I went to a talk recently and somebody said it, I don't measure anybody about the amount of money in the home, just the amount of love inside it.
Yeah, yeah,
And I was
fair.
like, oh,
Yeah.
dude, that speaks my boundaries, because some of the nicest people I've ever met have had a hell of a lot of money.
Yeah.
But they've worked the bloody arse off to get it, and
Yeah.
you meet them, and they've actually got a lot of wisdom to impart if you want to listen to them and take on note. But I do feel a lot of people will draw barriers straight away just because of that situation and setting they've perceived on them.
This is the problem. So when I talk about working class or middle class, it sounds really tribalistic, and it sounds like I hate all middle class people and all working class people are legends. And obviously it's ridiculous and it's not fair. I think what it is, it comes from if you're wanting to go into theatre or poetry, for example, and somebody is middle class and also comes from a position where they grew up with a library in the house and the university was paid for and they always had money to go on Avon course. They've had all this immense privilege. Oh, and the mum happened to be the director of this theatre or the dad ran Faber. You think, oh, well, you know, they're middle class, it's easier for them. And so you instantly get this, like, you get your defences up and you're like, you know, like, and then you see somebody who is so obviously middle class who's written a play about working class people, it's middle class actors performing to middle class audiences as a working class person, and it gets you back up. And I think that's where it comes from. It's that feeling of being at a disadvantage. And in places like theatre and less so poetry, but theatre, for example, it might be like, okay, well, you've got to take on 2 or 3 years of unpaid acting jobs and be at a study at this acting school before you can become an actor. And it's like, well, how are you going to do that unless you've got parents to support you or a trust fund or whatever? A working class kid wouldn't be able to do that because it'd have to be work, you know. So you just get the feeling that you're instantly
Becomes quite patronising then.
Yeah, and it becomes really difficult to get in, and then it's like, oh well, we've done this course and there's 20 people on it, but we want at least one working class person on it. So that's where it comes from. But it's not helpful to be like, oh, bloody middle class people. It's not a helpful thing, but I think it's just something that is ingrained in you because you feel like you're instantly looked down upon. And there's also a lot of demonisation of the working class as well, like, oh, you chav, and like, oh, they just go Witherspoons and they're all on benefits but they've got massive TVs, you know. There's this demonisation of the working class, so I think for that reason as well you slip into it, but it's not fair, is it? It's not sensible.
It lacks compassion.
Yeah, it's not sensible for somebody who, like me, who preaches, you know, trying to be compassionate and all that. It's probably not wise to be like, you know. But that's why I double back on myself, because I don't want to slag off middle class people. It's ridiculous.
I think
Silly.
I know it was nice hearing it, and I wanted to sort of investigate a little further, because I do feel that division can be quite strong, and people will put labels on certain people before meeting them. And I just think that's the wisest moment, is before you've established somebody's politics for your own perception, go and find out who that person is and what they're about, because they've probably got a great story there and journey. And they're very similar to you. They're a human.
Yeah.
And I much prefer nuance. These sort of conversations coming into play now, where people are a little bit more accepting of one another, and we're not too driven apart by just label, bingo. That's who you belong to. That's your tribe. Stay where you belong.
Yeah.
Because I feel, especially in times like this, we've really seen the importance of coming together.
Yeah, of course.
When there's a massive disaster happen, the best parts of human nature often, apart from on Twitter, but often come
you're
about.
right. Yeah, you're right. Of course.
I'd like to talk to you, as I am doing now, a little bit about making it as a poet, and not the making it concept of I made it, I'm playing on the big stages, but the making it in a new world where all these amazing jobs and prospects and possibilities are happening for working class people, but all people, we just seem to be going into a new time of possibilities.
Yeah.
And people are sprouting passions and really believe, I've got a chance to make this more than just a hobby, more than something. I go 9 to 5 here, and then if I'm bloody not too tired after, I can go and do that thing.
Yeah.
It's, oh no, I'm going to spin 10 plates because I want this to come off.
Yeah.
And I really like to talk about your journey of how that sort of unfolded, and sort of maybe some takeaways for young people to go, this is a really cool way forward for me.
I can't sell poetry as a viable career to anybody because it's
passions.
Not. Yeah, no, of course. So it's another tricky one, because at what point does it stop being an art form and start becoming a job? And finding that balance is very difficult. And this was one of the main arguments behind the whole nationwide adverts, because a lot of people are saying that poetry is an art form. It's a pure, beautiful thing. It's where people express their innermost thoughts. Why the fuck are you taking money from a building society to put it on a TV advert? Like, that's bastardizing it. It's polluting it. It's awful. But at the same time, if you earn your living from poetry and somebody says, we want to give you a life-changing sum of money for writing a poem, you're going to say, yeah. Do you know what I mean? And, but, like, a lot of people, but I'd never do one. And it's like, well, good for you. And two, I bet you fucking would if you got offered.
Why are you lying?
I don't want to get involved in it because it's a ridiculous debate that for some reason is still happening 5 years later. But
really?
Yeah. But it comes around every now and again. It's like poetry is the new rock and roll. Nationwide adverts. It just repeats. But what I'm saying is, so when I tell people that I write, that I'm a poet, and they're like, yeah, but what do you do for a living? I'm like, no, I'm a poet. It's really weird, and I think they can't, like, they presume that you spend all day lying around on a chaise longue with a smoking jacket on, writing sonnets, and then somebody just puts 100 quid in your bank account. Obviously,
Please
that's
tell me
not
you have done that though.
I can confirm I've never done that. But you know, so for example, before COVID, about 60% of my income came from working in schools, and probably in 2022 that'll be the same again. So I don't have a degree, I don't have any kind of teaching qualification, I don't have any piece of paper that says that I'm qualified to go into a classroom and teach anything at all, right? But what I've got is passion, and I can explain poetry. I'm not an expert, I'm not a professor, like I say, I ain't got a degree, but I can explain poetry in a way that enables children to find it accessible and gives them confidence at expressing their ideas. And the fact that I'm able to, one, that I genuinely do have the passion and enthusiasm, and two, I'm able to explain it in a way that a 7-year-old or an 8-year-old or a 15-year-old can get on board with, is a great combination. And so I'm able to use that to pay my bills. And so I'm very lucky that my passion translates. The thing is, we don't realise as poets, like, you can do a commission for a campaign, whether people like that or not, whatever. You can go into schools, you can do a gig, you can publish a book, you can do a theatre show. None of these things are guaranteed to make you money, but it's actually quite a flexible art form. So look, I'm very lucky that I've been able to do it. Obviously, you got to build it up. I didn't one day go from earning nothing at all from poetry to suddenly being a full-time job. It took years and years and years. And I'm very privileged and lucky in certain timings and certain locations, whatever. But I think if you've got that passion and you're able to monetize it sounds awful, but like, if you want it to be a job, you've got to monetize it at some point.
Make you love a living.
Yeah, make you love a living. Then you've got a chance. I think the whole thing of if you've got a dream, so long as you work hard, you can achieve it, I think is actually really toxic, because it assumes so many things. It assumes so many privileges. If you've got a dream and you work your absolute arse off, there's no guarantee whatsoever that you'll get anywhere. If you've got a dream and you don't work your ass off, you won't get anywhere. But people who are successful actors or musicians go, oh, you know, if you work hard enough, you'll get it. No, you got it because of X, Y, and Z. And myself included, like the fact that I'm as I've said, like a white man, heteronormative, like I probably got more opportunities 10 years ago than I might have done if I wasn't a white man. The fact that I was able to go live with my parents for a little bit whilst I built it up, that was another thing. The fact that I live in Leeds or London, do you know what I mean? If I lived in like the middle of Cornwall, I wouldn't. There's no way I would have been able to do it. So like, you know, it assumes a lot of privileges. But if you're an artist and you've got a passion, I think the passion and the enthusiasm is so infectious and is so important, and that's what people invest in. This sounds really corporate, right? But people connect with people. People invest in people. Do you know what I mean? And so if you're really passionate about something and you can convey that, other people will respond to it.
Completely.
Basically.
I mean, I've got a friend that wrote a book called Forget School, which literally came out on the day that schools were announced to shut, so lucky bugger. But he went around and interviewed, I think it's 150 successful, quote-unquote, young people from the ages of, I think it was 21 to 35, and asked them a simple question of, what did school teach you, and what didn't school teach you? And in making it in a self-employed world, or however they've gone about it, it could be a musician to a plumber to electrician. He's interviewed them all and just wanted to know some of the characteristics in which school didn't help them deal with, but they've had to learn outside of school. And just wondering what you have found being self-employed and making it in that degree. What were some of them lessons?
Microsoft Excel.
Yeah, big one.
I use multiple spreadsheets every day.
So would you say scheduling and planning would be one of the bit?
No, not at all. Not at all. No, Microsoft Excel, that's it. Now, I learn a lot more socially. I learned a lot more socially than I did academically. Like, I don't mean to brag, but I'm a fairly intelligent person, but I didn't really do that well exams. I did all right at GCSE, and I didn't do that great at A-level, but because I didn't apply myself. But I learned so much in friendship groups. I was bullied. I then ended up probably being a bit of a bully in terms of like I learned to use razor sharp wit and being funny in the playground to like become more popular. But obviously every time I did that, there was someone that was being laughed at as a result of what I'd said. I never targeted anyone or abused anyone or shoved their head down the toilet, but I used to make people laugh, and there was always someone being laughed at, right? So like, that's something I've learned about myself that I don't like, that I've sort of got over. But what I'm saying is, like, even like having girlfriends and having friendship groups or whatever, I learned a lot. I don't really remember anything much in the classroom, but I always use that argument for, a lot of people homeschool. I personally wouldn't homeschool my child because I think it is really important to gain empathy and to gain understanding and to meet other people and to have friendship groups, whatever. But in terms of a classroom, I think it's actually got worse since we left school. I mean, God, I left school a long time ago, but they're just exam factories, man.
Yeah.
And the amount of admin that teachers have to do, it's heartbreaking. They spend like half of the time working, half of the time in the classroom. And there's kids who are in like year 5 who are worried about the SATs.
Yeah.
And everything they do is measured in like boxes and numbers and ratings, even when they're in primary school. It's just awful. And what I've really found now, because I work in a school every week, secondary school, they can only think literally, as in they can only think in terms of what's right and wrong. So when you're asking them to write poetry, it's the complete opposite. It's like, use your imagination, make something up, say something that's not true, and they really struggle to do it because they're brainwashed into exams and tests and right and wrong answers.
Here's a question, what's the answer?
Yeah.
Here's a question, what's the answer? And they're not thinking laterally.
They can't think outside the box or use their imagination because they're never encouraged to do it. And because I'm asking them to do it in a classroom, they think I'm going to be like, that's wrong. And I've noticed it a lot over the last few years that kids are a lot more like that. I mean, it's partly
you see it going in that direction as well.
Yeah.
Hardening on that.
Yeah, definitely.
Wow.
I think it's partly smartphones as well, because attention spans are shot to shit.
Yeah.
And I'll be like, you can write a poem about the most amazing story, like make up the most incredible story you can, and they'll read me a story. I'm like, that's amazing. They're like, oh yeah, it's from a video game. I'm like, no, like use your think. But like in the times when we used to go for, I sound like a right old git now.
Yeah,
but
here we go.
when we, you
Go
know,
on, Grandad, you boomer.
the 2 hours on a Sunday where you'd make up a game with your mates or go for a walk or whatever, it's just spent like it just
Curiosity, imagination. I mean,
yeah.
what are some of the exercises you try and implement to build that away from them and evolve that creativity? I mean, I do one with that exactly what you had in mind, where we have a piece of paper, and you may have seen this done, but I've taken something I learnt from somebody else, but tried to use it in the classroom for my own fitting.
Yeah.
And it was just drawing a picture of your eyes closed.
Right.
But a portrait of yourself.
Interesting.
So we do that, and I take this in everywhere with me because it's about mistakes.
Right.
And the kids, so I go around and look, and mainly in primary schools, they're fairly good.
Yeah.
It's when they get into secondary, they all want to look, and they won't put anything down. But I remember one primary school I went into, and I'm going around, and they love this activity. It's really fun. And one girl just didn't put a thing.
Right.
So I called it, and I said, well, right, everybody, who cheated? And there's a few hands gone in the air. Yeah, I looked. Most didn't. And I said to this girl, sort of, I know you didn't put anything.
Yeah.
Why didn't you put anything down? And she said them words, I didn't want to be wrong.
Right, yeah.
And I was gone, I never said now,
That's heartbreaking,
in this activity, there's a right and a wrong way of doing it. I just said, we're going to do an activity, it's going to be a lot of fun. With your eyes closed, draw a picture of your face. And she didn't dare do it.
Oh, bless
and
her.
that was early on in doing these activities.
Yeah.
And then later on, that was the common theme. People
Yeah.
wouldn't put stuff down because they didn't want to be wrong. And I think you do have to build into the classroom this excitable ruthlessness as a young person. Then you start to mature it as you get older.
Yeah.
But just the daring to do, and the daring to do it wrong and learn from that, and make mistakes. And they don't want to make the first mistake. So do you have stuff in the classroom that you try and build on that?
There's a poetic prompt that I use, which is there is no such thing as. And I basically get him to write a list poem, and each line starts with there is no such thing as. And so sometimes it'll be like there is no such thing as I don't know, like rainbow coloured poo. And then they'll be like, oh, there's no such thing as true equality. And then it'll be like there's no such thing as flying scooters. And then basically just like sometimes it's really serious, sometimes really abstract, but I'm basically like, if you write in a poem, it doesn't have to be true, it doesn't have to be real. If you're writing a story, you can change anything. They can literally change anything. And I think it's just trying to encourage them to abandon almost like they're trying to write a factual piece of...
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? Like, so I think that's the most important thing. I mean, it's something that I struggle with as well, and I don't know about you, but if I'm writing a poem, or like when I'm working on my novel, I get hung up on whether something's true or not. And it's like, it's a fucking poem. It's a novel. Like, Harry Potter, none of that's true. Do you know what I mean? Like, just allow yourself to... What does it need to be in your story or in your poem? Then that's fine. So, like, yeah, encouraging kids to...
I'm going to give you a link to a book after this called The Book of Thunks. And my friend Ian Gilbert wrote that about 20 years ago.
Yeah.
But it was this quite revolutionary philosophy for children.
Right.
And he goes in, and it's thousands of questions of what colour's Tuesday?
Nice.
If elephants run the world. But it was that grey area
that's
towards everything where there is no possible right or wrong answer. There has to be an array of right answers. Everything's right in how you perceive it, what you understand. So I've got that book.
That's a really good idea.
I'll give you one. I'll give you a... It's so interesting. Again, I'll tell you this from the book. It's the first 4 or 5 pages is actual... the science behind it, and then the rest of the book's just questions.
Brilliant.
But this was the anecdote they use, and it was an English teacher, and there was a mathematician who could only see maths as the answer. Everything has a provable answer. Everything has a way of finding an answer to it. So then, it was a beautiful anecdote. This girl had lived at home with mum and dad.
Yeah.
And one of them said in the classroom, the teacher said, "No, that's not true. Life is," and we'll say the N word. Life has got grey. Life is beautiful, and that is the beauty of it. All the magical mystery of everything.
Yeah.
So the teacher said, "What's a third of love?" And the mathematician said, "Well, that's a nonsensical question. It doesn't belong. There's no reason to it." But then the girl in the classroom put her hand up and said, I know what a third of love is. And she said, toothpaste. And then she went on to say, because she was prompted, like, can you go a bit further with that? Why is it toothpaste? And she lived with, and this was only 11-year-old, and it's a true anecdote as well, but she lived with mum and dad, and then they split up. And the only sign of seeing that dad was coming and reintroducing himself back into the family, because he'd only come at night, but he'd always leave his toothbrush there.
Right.
So a third of love for her was toothpaste, because she remembered by her dad coming back into the family.
Wow.
And that honestly got me. I was right. I'm in. This is my book.
That sounds
But it was so beautiful, and that is what I try and go into schools with. Is, there is no right and wrong today, because all my life that was my fear of being wrong and dyslexic. I didn't start writing until I was 21.
Really?
And I lost a friend to a knife crime incident.
Yeah.
And that was my first poem. And it was while I was away in South Africa. Right. And I came straight back, Dad, I found this new thing, poetry, writing. I thought I'd made something. I'd never seen John Cooper Clarke or anyone before. I said, it's like rap, but no beat, and sort of fast-acting movement with my I honestly thought I'd came up with something. I'd never been in the music scene before. So I was just so excited. Yeah. And then that opened the door for me to meet people like yourself.
Yeah.
But I've got to ask this then. Do you think the education system, because we've got there, is it gonna? What if you want to be conspiratorial, right? I don't know if you are a conspiracy theorist, but let's go conspiratorial thinking.
Yeah.
Is it a byproduct that people are put into boxes and made to not think, here is a question, here is an answer? Is that just because it's an outdated system and they're not bothered about changing it? Or is it deployed cleverly to keep people anaesthetised, not to think, and stay in your boxes, because really we want you to come out as robots, apart from those people that can thrive from that and adhere to the system?
The latter, without a doubt.
Really?
Because it specifically moved a lot more in that direction. I mean, all right, so I started doing workshops in 2013. So it's not like I'm a massive authority on this, but that's nearly 10 years. And I've always had friends who are teachers, and I've always, hung out in... I'm not an expert, but from what I've seen, it specifically is moving in that direction. Like Jeremy Hunt, Michael Gove, and Nicky Morgan, and every time it specifically moved in that direction. And I do... Yeah, you sound like a conspiracy nut, but I do genuinely believe that they don't want to encourage imagination and creativity, because they're the things that lead people to question the bigger things. And the fact that, Nicky Morgan was saying that art shouldn't really be a subject. Do you know what I mean? They've cut loads of art funding. They don't want art to be a subject. They don't want people thinking creatively. They want people to answer yes, that's right or wrong. Like the whole of their life is right or wrong, and is like a spreadsheet. And so that they'll be good workers, basically. And that sounds ridiculous, but I do believe it's true, yeah.
I'm of that way of thinking too, completely.
And the evidence is there. It's not like this is some kind of wild conspiracy, they're putting stuff in school dinners to make people more subservient. Do you know what I mean? It's like the evidence is there in terms of what they've said, the policies they've put in, exam structures, but also the academisation of schools as well. Now, I work with a lot of academies, so I don't have a problem with individual schools, but the way that academies are run is allowing that to be much more of a thing, because it's a lot less uniform. Do you know what I mean? So even having Britishness as a core school theme and I don't know, it's weird. But
it is weird.
I do think it's moving more like that. Yeah.
And you're heavily into the education system. You go into lots and lots of different schools, but again, does it fill you with that lack of belief that we can change things? Are you still excited by going into schools and being able to express your passion?
Yeah.
Or when you see it hardening again and tightening and going in the wrong direction, does that just worry you?
It's frustrating rather than worrying because I don't think you'll ever stop. I know what I said earlier about kids struggle. I think that's just when I'm asking them a question in a classroom setting, they're scared of giving the wrong answer. But on the flip side, some of the things that kids come out with is unbelievable, is wonderful, and I don't think you'll ever dull a kid's imagination. And there are so many brilliant teachers out there now. The brilliant teachers are knackered, weighed down, dismayed by the system, got so much admin, but there's still brilliant teachers, and I think kids will always, I don't think it's frustrating because I don't think the system is set up to help people thrive, but I don't think you'll ever stop people. And also, like you said, you speak to a lot of artists, so if you read interviews with a lot of artists, like, oh yeah, I hated school, I was crap at school, then they've got a Mercury nominated album. I just think if people just stop engaging with school and trying to succeed in school, they're probably more likely to be passionate at something else. Do you know what I mean? And so in a weird way, much as it sort of encourages us all to be worker bees and sort of obedient and robots or whatever, you're never going to crush creative thought. You're never going to crush people who want to question the system and do their own thing. You can't do it. So it's frustrating, and I wish it wasn't like that, but I don't worry because I've got faith. Sounds like I'm a right cynical git the whole interview. No. This is shit. But no, I've got faith.
I feel that faith, mate. I feel that passion and power.
I believe in children of a future.
Yes, this is where we start getting, you gotta have faith and children of the future. I'm just gonna snip in all these song clips. I mean, my partner's amazing woman and went into schools. She's a secondary school teacher, but to teach the thing that she loved most. And again, that bureaucracy and all the system and how it's got to be deployed, it's so far down the list of, and don't forget, teach the thing you love. She has to go through all the jargon and all this sort of, well, just bullshit down the line and marking system and speaking to them a certain way. And I suppose my worry, but keeping the faith, is just having them similar conversations, but just noticing all them good people that you talk about are starting to leave the system. And that's where you worry the Voldemort and his disciples are becoming more prominent, I suppose, within that.
No, it's true. It's true. A lot of good, genuine, passionate teachers who want to do it more than anything in the world are walking away from the education system because they can't deal with the system anymore, and that is very sad, and that is worrying. But much as you might think, oh well, then they're just going to end up with teachers who are happy robots, happy to play along. I don't think anybody would choose to do teaching unless they had a real passion for it. Some teachers end up. I think it's a labour of loving it. Honestly, it's a career, but like it's a passion. Teaching is a passion, and I think that'll always exist.
Yeah, I mean, you're taking it not just in the classroom, but then you're going away. You mark it. It's a full time.
Oh yeah, it's an extra. It's a full time. It's like, I'm not saying it's like being a nurse, but it's one of them jobs where it's sort of is your life. I think those people will always exist, and I think that passion will always be there. And much as I don't like the system, there's only so far they can push it. Do you know what I mean?
It's just my belief that, from what I'm noticing in this new world setup, just seems alternative measures and other. I mean, tonight you've come here into Ripley in the sticks, and we've got essentially a classroom propped up for a few hours where people are approaching and going to try 11 to 14-year-olds a brand new skill that they would have never imagined.
Totally, yeah.
And I really do see these pop-up schools and educations all over. I've been to amazing places in Leeds in particular. I remember going to Unity Park and workshop spaces all over, and that's the faith for me. That excites me, because these people, it's not like they're leaving education system and drifting off into the night never to be seen again, but they've gone, okay, well, there's a lot of workshoppers out there, then there's people displaying that passion, but that's what they get to do 100% of it, rather than all this jargony side. That's what I'm going to go and look at doing myself. So I think that's what I've noticed, and that's what keeps my faith, genuinely. Totally. Before we do, because we're going to have to call an end to it soon. We're nearly a good hour and a half in, brother.
Really?
We smashed this baby.
Nice.
I just want to hear a bit more about, because I've not seen you for 5 years. I'm going to go 5.
Maybe, yeah. If 4, I'd say 4. I
4.
reckon, yeah, we did Derby.
Are you
word-wise.
counting Corona times though? Because sometimes I write it off, and that's been a 2-year stint, hasn't it?
We definitely did a tour in May 2017,
Okay.
and Derby was one of the dates on it.
I might
with
not have been
Selena.
there that time.
Or maybe
though.
you weren't there that time.
Yeah, I think
Well,
I had
then-
a time off, so I reckon even before that.
Okay, well,
But
okay, 5 then.
the evolution of them years, how much have you changed your approach to poetry, your writing, and where is it going now? You've got the novel you spoke about.
Yeah, so I'm writing a novel, which is a silly thing, spending years and years and years establishing yourself as a poet and then going, I'm going to write a novel.
I
Silly.
likes it. What did make you make that leap then?
This sounds really wanky, but I knew what. So after Two Little Ducks, straight away I had to write my kid. I had to straight away. I was commissioned to write my kids' poetry collection, and then straight after that we wrote another Skint and Demoralised album. And then I had about 6 months of not doing anything. I was like, okay, what's my next thing gonna be? And I had this story that I needed to tell. And I opened up a Word document and started typing away. And I was working on it for a few months, not really knowing what it was. Is it a long poem? Is it a collection? Is it a show? And basically, just the more I worked on it, the more I was like, oh shit, okay, this is a novel. It just sort of happened. Do you know what I mean? So I am still working on a collection as well. I think, like I say, I'm just. I don't know. Two Little Ducks was pretty much activism as well. I just like to think that I've matured a bit and that I am just a little bit more conscious about the long-term aims of what I'm writing. I don't really know, to be honest. I'm winging it. I've got no idea.
Is that real? You're just winging it and enjoying it. I mean, I've really loved your poetry when I saw it in. Then I'm gonna go 6 years. 6 years ago at Wordwise. It's so performative.
Yeah.
Really enjoyed seeing you on the stage.
Yeah.
I've read your poetry before, I like it, but seeing you perform, I love it. I really engage with that. And that's what I spoke about at the start of the podcast. You speak in my language, but in such a excitable, passionate way. Is performance still your style, or...?
Yeah, no, of course, I love performing. I think ultimately the thing that I love more than anything else will be performing on stage, without a doubt, yeah. And if I had to choose... like doing a tour of 1,000-seater venues that sold out or winning a big prize for a novel, I'd choose the tour.
Really?
Do you know what I mean? Yeah, totally. Like, that's ultimately what I always exist for. But what I've realised was I don't really want to go out there and perform again until I've written something that's like a step above what I did last time. Do you know what I mean? I'm sort of, much as I realise I've taken myself out of the limelight by not gigging as much, I feel like when I come back to gigging, it's like, oh shit, okay, your new stuff's really good. Rather than slipping into that cycle of still performing the same poems for 4, 5, 6, 7 years. Do you know what I mean? So I'm really looking forward to getting back into doing that. But at the moment, it's like, well, what? So I was mentoring someone. This was a strange experience. I was mentoring someone, and the first session, because they asked me to, I was speaking all about your social media and your website and how to get jobs and how to budget and how to whatever. And then I had a bit of an epiphany, and I was like, none of that matters unless your art's good. Like, there's no point being amazing at social media, amazing at a website, amazing at getting jobs if you've got shit poems.
Yeah.
There's no point. It's literally, there's no point. And you do slip into that habit of, social media and delighted to announce that, all that toxic stuff. You slip into it and you lose sight of what's important. So at the moment, I'm just trying to concentrate on my writing as much as possible. And the day that I get to go on stage and perform my new material and hopefully get a good response, I'm very much looking forward to it. But
are you feeling confident in that writing?
No, I'm shitting myself. Really? I'm absolutely shitting myself. But you've sort of got to, like you were saying before we started the podcast, you've sort of got to write for yourself.
Yeah.
You've got to write for yourself, because if you believe in what you're writing and you have faith and you have confidence in the standard of it and you have faith in why you're doing it or whatever, that's what you need. And then if you take it on stage or you put it out on YouTube or whatever and people respond to it, that's great. But if you're specifically doing it because you think it'll get likes or get views or whatever, and then it fails, you'll just feel like a dickhead.
And have you been in that part of your psyche before where you have had other people in mind before self?
I don't... maybe only a little bit, like around the 2017 election. I was writing stuff that I specifically thought would get a lot of traction around the 2017 election campaign and Corbyn support to an extent, but never that much.
You're quite a self-aware person, though, from my perspective. So when you are writing with that, at heart, it's very quick to go, no, this is garbage, Mikey, or this is garbage, Matt. Put that to the side. I always catch myself doing it through that self-awareness of, how's this? No, that's not me.
Yeah.
Do you catch yourself quite quickly when it slopes to that?
Yeah. I think if you're writing a poem that sounds like a Mikey Markham poem or sounds like a Matt Abbott poem, then you realise quite quickly it's just poem by. You need to write something that almost feels like it's not you. Yeah. You constantly need to push yourself and educate yourself and read more poets and watch more gigs and do more workshops and whatever. You've constantly got to push yourself and just have, like, the novel I'm working on now. That's just my current vehicle. I don't know where I'm going to be in 5-10 years, but I'll put everything I can into this novel. Then I'll do the next thing, and hopefully each time I'll just get better as a writer. That's all you can hope for, isn't it? Really.
Vibrant, man.
Just educate yourself more and more. And in that weird point where I'm not an emerging poet anymore, like I'm not an up and coming poet, but I'm not like an established poet. Do you know what I mean? So I'm in that sort of like awkward middle ground. So
back to where you started.
Put all the effort I can into my writing. That's what you should do. And if you do that, the rest of it should take care of itself.
Do you feel that Two Little Ducks, and you wrote to your heights there, and you wanted to transcend that and make much better art now, and you won't perform it until then? Are you writing up that chord, or are you chasing a tail there? Because when I started, because it was so raw and so painful, so I could write, I think I wrote 5 or 6 poems I really love. I performed one at the Wakefield one. It's bloody long, but it's about substances in my drug abuse days.
Right.
But because I wrote what I think are like my heavy hitters, my real most passionate work, that feeling of I'm never going to surpass them again because I've already told my most prominent stories. How do you get to them levels?
It's terrifying. It's terrifying, isn't it? I'm never going to top that. I'm never going to beat that. Like, there's a poem in Two Little Ducks called Red, White and Blue, which is about the Union flag. And that, like, every time I do a gig, people are, I love that Union flag poem. And I'm like, how am I going to write a poem in this collection that's better than that? I'm terrified. I don't know.
I know that poem, and you know a good poem when I can remember that from them years ago.
Yeah, so, like, I don't know. I'm terrified, but you've just got to have faith. You just got to keep educating yourself, aren't you? Like I say, read more, do more workshops, see more people. And there's no point putting out the same album twice. Like, I'm not... Like, I've always loved Arctic Monkeys, obviously. And Favourite Worst Nightmare was quite different to whatever people say I am. That's what I'm not. And he was like, well, what's the point in putting out the same album twice? And, like, not that I'm comparing myself, but I've always looked up to Alex Turner saying that. And it's like, so my next collection needs to be better than Two Little Ducks. It shouldn't be Two Little Ducks version 2. It needs to be better. And until I get to that point, I won't put it out. So I'm under a lot of pressure at the moment. Pressure's good,
all
though,
good
innit?
pressure, yeah. That's where true beauty comes from, in that graft and in that resilience.
But also, to some extent, I think you've got to have faith in the fact that a poetry collection is sort of a time capsule. So for me, Two Little Ducks, like, at the time, was the best thing I could have written, and is a capsule of me at that moment in my life. And if now I write something that is to the best of my ability in my early 30s, I'm aware that hopefully in 10 years I'll write something and look back at this collection and go, oh, that's shit. But as long as it's the best that you can be at that moment in your life, recognise that it is a time capsule and it's sort of like a snapshot of you at that moment in time. You got to have you're never going to write the best collection of all time.
No.
So just write it to the best of your ability at that point in your life.
Forever changing.
Yeah.
What about adding in other elements to your art then as well? Sort of, have you tried working with music?
Yeah, so I was a professional musician for about 6 years.
I remember that.
And we still
breezed over that, didn't we?
we released an album in 2019. We're working on another album now. It's good to write to different art. So like, it's good when I'm writing something that I think is a lyric instead of a poem. Sometimes they overlap or one becomes the other. It is nice to have that. Yeah, it is nice to have that. But the way that David and I write is I write lyrics at my house, he writes music in his house. Whenever we're in a room together, like jamming, like he'll send me an instrumental or I'll send him a lyric, and then it becomes a song. So it's still it's not that different to writing poetry in that sense, but yeah, no, it is exciting. I mean, obviously I'm writing a novel and I've written a TV pitch as well, and like, so I'm, you got to, it's just, they're all branches on the same tree.
They are, but yeah. I suppose by spinning them plates, do you find it gives breath back into the art that, say, doing I do videography now and work for lots of different sort of music videos and documentaries and so on, but I get to also create my own poetry into film and build that. But then I can see a beautiful shot somewhere, and that's a poem straight away. I'm going, oh, I could turn that into this, and it does give breath into it. So a great piece of advice, but spinning lots of different plates, that helps all the other process on the way.
It can do, but I'd say maybe spinning 2 or 3 plates.
Yeah, not 10.
This is the problem. You see, it's a difficult. So if I think to myself, oh, if I spend 6 months really intensely writing my novel, and then come to writing a poetry collection, it's a new art form all over again. Monday I'm writing my novel, Tuesday I'm writing my poems. It's great to bounce between them, and one art form informs the other, and you learn things as a writer writing a novel that you can then informs your poetry and vice versa. But if you're trying to write a novel and a poetry collection and an album and this and that and that, you spread yourself too thin.
Yeah.
And I've been at risk of doing that recently, and I've had to check myself. But ultimately, like I say, if what you're doing is making you a better writer, then it's fine. It's just, don't screw yourself over by spreading yourself too thin. Like, you're never going to be a specialist. You got to be a specialist at something, and use other things to support it. Do you know what I mean? But
and living life a little. I remember when I'd become a writer, a poet, self-proclaimed. I remember just thinking, I've got to write. Yeah. And it came out eventually so contrived and saturated, and not just in the mindset of, oh, I hope people like this.
Yeah.
But I just wasn't living experiences anymore, so I had nothing to document about.
Well, this is another difficult thing, because, like, you've got to have the discipline to make yourself write. You've got to have a discipline to sit down and write. And, like, you know, if you've got 10 emails to respond to, and you've got to promote a gig, and you've got to do a workshop, and you've got to prepare for this, then writing is the bottom of your list, right? And then recognising that actually that writing time's the most important thing you'll ever do. So you've got to have a discipline, but at the same time, sometimes it's just not happening, and it ends up being contrived. Yeah. So it's having that, it's knowing when, do you know what, it's not working. But even if you say, I'm going to sit down and write for 2 hours, and half an hour into it, it's not happening, at least you've tried. Because so many times I've thought, I can't be arsed, this isn't going to go anywhere. And half an hour in, I'm like, oh my God, this is a goer. Do you know what I mean? So you just don't know. Unless you try, you just don't know. So it's difficult to have that discipline, but just knowing, okay, if I'm not writing very well today, I'll read for an hour. Because so often you read and then you get an idea. Not that you nick it, but if you read good writers, it makes you want to write. How many times have you been at a gig and you've watched someone performing live and you'd be, oh, I want to write this poem, I want to write that. It inspires you to want to write, and it's the same with reading, I think.
I suppose it's just having an open mind and being ready to find inspiration all the time.
Yeah.
Again, have you heard of that Japanese art form where they break a pot, but instead of just letting it break, they fill it back with gold? And it means that the pot's actually more beautiful because of the brokenness. Again, I was listening to a jazz rap album on. I love Spotify for this, because you can put it on random. And there's thousands on shuffle, and you'll always find something. But the song was cool. I can't remember what the art form's called. If people are watching this, I'll put it up and ping it up. But yeah, it's a beautiful art form. So the song's called that. It's like kahuchi, something kahuchi or kajeki. But again, that the song was so stunning, and they had this, the message was about your brokenness and your cracks. And that was the moment. That was an idea emerged then, and I thought about my brokenness and cracks and mistakes. Nobody can design that poem back from my own learning experience and from my own times and journey, but I get to take the concept away and write with that. So it was completely respect what you're saying there. It was being open in that moment to find that inspiration and take it away. Oh, mate, I'm excited about tonight now. These little munchkins are going to have a right little session.
Yeah, it's going to be good fun.
Are you going to go into schools for the end of time at the minute and keep on doing your poetry? Does it feel right?
Well, going into schools?
Everything about the poetry journey you're on.
It
feels where you should be.
I love going in. I'm very, very privileged to be able to do poetry as a job. And much as school's work is tiring and it's hard work, it's so fulfilling and stimulating. And I think if you can find something that's fulfilling and stimulating that pays your bills, and then whenever you're not in a school, you would dedicate your time to writing, I think it's a combination that I'm very satisfied with. So I'm very fortunate, and I'm very grateful for the position I'm in. And because the thing is, like, you know, every now and again I write a commission, but that's something that just falls in my lap. I can contact a school and say, do you want me to come in? And they say, yeah, and I put it in my diary. With a commission, like commissions I earn quite a lot of money from, but I'm not in control of it. The schools, for my mental well-being, I know that I'll always have schools work, so I'm not, if I start a family or whatever, I need to know that I'm going to be able to provide my end of the bargain with money or whatever. And schools is something I love doing it, so I'm very fortunate.
I just really love talking to you. I keep finding new way and pathway. But have you got any really beautiful anecdotes of when you've been in a school and there's been a moment of somebody that maybe you didn't expect to express themselves or find a route in with them, and they thought, no, poetry is for me?
So I try to work quite a lot in alternative provision, so SEMH, which is social, emotional and mental health needs, and quite often they don't want to know, they abuse you, they chuck chairs, they're not having it at all, and by the end of the 2 hours they've written this amazing thing. And it's like, for me, because when they hear the word poetry, they think that you're going to be like lecturing them on sonnets and rhyme schemes or whatever. All I tell them is that it's a way for you to use your voice. And I'll start off by saying, how many times do you get told what not to do, what to do, where to go, when to be there, what to wear, how to wear it, whatever. And they're always like, I'm like, how many times do you get asked what you think? And as soon as that light switches
That's
on,
beautiful.
I'm like, this is your voice. This is your chance to say something. People have got to listen. Forget about the fact that it's poetry. I'm not interested in poetry. Like, obviously I am, but all you're doing is using your voice. And like, sometimes it's usually the boys who are like 14, 15, 16 who just feel like they're a naughty boy. They've always been told off, that no one gives a shit. Like, you know what I mean? They conform to type. And like, I feel like I can connect with them quite often. But I also once asked an 8-year-old girl what her favourite colour was, and she said sparkle.
Mate.
So like, on the other end of the scale, I just love it. Kids are just brilliant. The stuff they come out with, it's ace. The stuff that you couldn't come out with as a 32-year-old man.
Nah, too conditioned.
Yeah, you just can't. And a 7 or 8, 9-year-old, they come out with stuff and you're like, oh, that's brilliant. So I love all aspects of it, really. It's amazing.
Mine's from a Prue, and I remember it's just how he disassociated writing and poetry and what he did, because it was my first ever school, and I'd been performing at a festival. And
you went to a Prue?
It was in Nottingham. And this woman she was watching, but in that way where somebody watches and it's so intense, and you sort of you negate all of the other people in the audience, and you're just performing it for that woman. And we were so connected on stage. And afterwards she got really teary, but said, you're coming into this school. And I said, well, my schooling experience wasn't great. I did get asked to leave eventually. And so she got me in, and have you seen The Simpsons, where Grandpa Simpson walks in to this, and I think it's a brothel, and Bart's working on the door, and he's whistling, and he's like, do-do-do, and then he sees Bart, and he just walks straight back out. Well, I walked in, and she'd bigged me up massively, and I hate that anyway. It's too much expectation. And then I walk up, and I go, yeah, I'm your poet today. 4 lads just sat in front of me. And one of them I still speak to this day went, fuck off, mate. And so I went, all right, here we go. I was going to do that walk. But I performed, and again, it was very how I saw you and how you felt to me when you performed. I must have turned some cogs where he was feeling, no, actually, that's not poetry. So he went, that's not poetry. That's fucking sick. But he went in his bag, reached to the bottom, and got out all these scribblings and stuff, lyrics and writings. And he's been in this Prue 2 years, and his teacher had no idea that he wrote a thing.
Wow.
And he just disassociated that from poetry and writing and rap and art in any form. So he put on this beat, and it was quite grimy. And honestly, this is true. So he performed it, and it was really hard hitting, sort of his stepdad beating his mum, substances in the house, all the things you can imagine you've experienced with young people. And I went, nah, that's fucking poetry. But the teacher wanted a bit of that madness in there. And honestly, all the kids, the other 3 lads, went and gave him a hug afterwards. And it was so... And I remember just thinking, this is what I want to do. This is
Yeah.
such a beautiful moment, and that's what it can do. It's just your story, and I love what you said there.
Totally, it's so important.
Helping people find their voice.
Just knowing that they have one.
Yeah.
What you say is important. What you say is relevant. It's not right or wrong. If you think it, it's important. That's the thing. That's what I'm trying to drill into people. So yeah, no, I'd love doing schools work. I love that I've got a chance to do it.
Just say that one thing you said. It was you always get told how to think, what to think, when to think, but when are you ever asked what you think?
Yeah,
I think that's so, honestly that's my moment and takeaway today. I love that.
It's you responding to what an adult says to you rather than an adult responding to what you say to them. Basically, is what I'm trying to say,
mate.
So
the one thing on music, you used to be in a band.
Yeah.
Did you find it hard to incorporate your poetry into the music, or because you had sort of rhythm ingrained into you and so on? Was it quite easy?
It was easy, yeah, because I'd always performed. Because in my early days, because I was getting on stage at music festivals and that, all my stuff was very fast-paced and rhymey. Like, not all of it is now. So I set up this is how long ago it was, I set up a MySpace music profile. And I'd recorded some poems on my phone and uploaded them to MySpace. This geezer, David Gledhill, he was looking for vocalists to work with. He'd approached Paloma Faith and Adele. They both said no. Then he approached me, and I said yeah. And so he already had these instrumentals. So he just took my recordings and chopped them up and put them over the instrumentals.
Right.
And that's how it started.
Oh,
and
wow.
then we ended up like I'd write something specifically to his, or he'd write something specifically for me. I actually started writing songs together, and then within 9 months we signed to Universal.
Huh.
So it just went fucking crazy.
Where can people listen to that music?
Anywhere.
Spotify?
Yeah.
Is it just under Matt Abbott?
No, Skint and Demoralised. The band's called
Skint
Skint and Demoralised. Yeah.
And it is what sort of genre are we talking here?
It's indie pop, alternative indie pop. Sort of like, I don't know, maybe a bit like Squeeze slash like spoken word like The Streets, but musically maybe a bit more like The Cure or Squeeze.
I'm buzzing.
That sort
for
of
this.
thing.
Yeah, I'm excited to listen to this.
We nearly made it. We nearly had a big hit, but we just fell short of the final hurdle. Went down in a ball of flames.
And
these things happen.
I promise you that this will be the last thing. I'll wrap it up. But
It's all right.
I'm really enjoying this. You did mention in the podcast a little bit about social media, and how you conduct yourself on that. Have you found anything that works? Have you found a recipe that suits you?
What, for promoting poetry?
No,
or just
for
as a
conducting
person?
yourself on social media, not getting too drawn in by it, not losing your mental health to it, but also still being able to use it as a business tool.
So like Twitter's my thing.
Yeah.
Right? I am on Instagram and YouTube and Facebook and that, but it's a means to an end. Twitter's my thing, but much as I do use it to promote gigs, and I do ultimately see it as a professional thing to an extent, I sort of just use it as me. And I think if you only use it to promote gigs, then people are going to get bored of it. And if you're on there as an artist but you never promote your work, then maybe you're missing a trick. But I don't know. To be honest, so I've been on Twitter 13 years, and it sounds really weird, but it's just part of my life now. And I did go through a phase where I was constantly being drawn into arguments, and it is really bad for your mental health. The other day, it happened to me, and it puts you in a bad mood for the rest of the day. How fucking ridiculous is that? I was on about refugees, right?
Yeah.
So, the 27 people died on the beach, having come over. And I know for a fact that I'm always going to get shit, because I ain't got that many followers. I've got like 12,000 followers, so it's enough.
Yeah.
And because a lot of them are Leeds United fans, a lot of them are from a different cross-section, I know that I'm going to get shit, and 9 times out of 10 I can ignore it, but every now and again I can't help fucking getting involved.
Yes, baby.
And then you end up arguing with someone for like half an hour, 40 minutes, or it goes on for an hour, and then you're in a bad mood for the rest of the day. It's stupid. It's absolutely stupid. And so now I tend to think I'm only going to get into a discussion if there's a chance that we might see common ground, if there's a chance that it might be a productive, if it's a bot or a troll, or if it's someone who's just a knobhead, there's just no point. It's a waste of time and energy.
How much time do you think you've lost to that?
Back in the day, I was an out. Yeah. Around 2016, 2017, maybe 2018, it got really bad, and then I just got to a point where I was like, just ignore him, just block him. If they're obviously a dickhead, just block him. There's no point. It's weird, isn't it? But I think Twitter's wonderful because I've met friends through Twitter. I keep up on music news, football news, politics news. It's an important news source. I enjoy it. It's funny. Like, people in the poetry scene I've not seen for years, but I know what they're up to through Twitter. I do love it, but you've got to know when to block and ignore.
Mine's the opposite way around as well. Twitter's my sort of means to an end, and
Right,
all the others are sort of where I'm more trying to pop off and
Yeah,
do
yeah.
stuff. But I mean, this has become in the last year or 2 years, but mine's post and ghost. Honestly, that's my whole technique, and it's saved so much time, but so much mental capacity.
What, as in you do a post and then just don't go on?
I'm gone.
Right.
But I've started to get into scheduling. So create a studio. You can do your Instagram and Facebook.
Yeah.
And then Twitter, I use Hootsuite.
Yeah, Hootsuite, yeah.
Hootsuite, that's it. Hootsuite.
Yeah, I get that. I think it's sensible. It is sensible if you're going to do because, yeah.
I don't think this approach is for everybody, and it's probably not as engaging with your audience and hearing what the consensus of people and their thinking are and their beliefs. I'm a little bit outside of that understanding now, and I feel I needed that. I needed that freshman. It's having a baby, really, but
yeah, that's fair.
I was so engrossed in the business sort of thriving and doing well. The poetry, I didn't want to leave that on the sidelines, so I was pushing that. And I had one day where I looked at my time on the screen. I think it was 16 hours one day. It got to them heights.
Yeah.
And I've just had such conversations with great people that get suckered in by this and this thirst to make it and to accelerate your business through it, and it's really, really beautiful tool. But I think there should be like masterclasses and workshops on how to really utilize it without getting too sucked in.
Yeah, there probably are. You could probably. I mean, I've been employed a few times. The only time I've earned money in the last 6 years that wasn't through poetry was doing social media for like an arts festival or whatever. Like, there's a lot of money in it, but I think, if over a 3-year period you've not written one poem that you're really proud of, but you've gained 2,000 followers on Twitter, don't fucking mean anything.
Yeah,
doesn't mean anything. And it's that instant return though. If you do a tweet and it gets like 200 notifications, you're buzzing about it, and then you get 100 more followers, then you're buzzing about it, and then that person follows you that you think's cool, and and it's every day you're getting these little things that are validating you, thinking, yeah, I'm good, I'm doing well as a Twitter, I've got these, or on Instagram, I've got these followers, I've got this many views on my story, whatever, and you think that's good, that's progress, that's good, that's progress, and then after 2 years, you're like, I've not written anything, and I fall for it all the time. And the thing is, what we don't realise is, I think we're actually like addicts.
Yeah,
we're actually addicts, like on our phone. Like,
100%.
I wake up in the morning, the first thing I do is go on my phone.
Yeah,
and like even if like there's an advert break on telly, both get your phones out.
Yeah,
it's fucking mental.
Social Dilemma. Have you seen it?
Yeah, no, I've not actually. But
it's really good. But again, it's just explaining how cleverly designed it is through the algorithm to keep on, because that is its whole objective, is to keep you on the screen time as much as you possibly can. So it's deployed that way.
Yeah,
I mean, the whole conversation's been wonderful because I love talking to somebody that likes to dance in the grey and be in the balance factor, because for me also, I had honed in on my craft, and I've really gone to town on going to renting out studio space time and working with musicians and writing from my heart and my most important place. But I do feel then a lot of the stuff I wrote recently, because I've not bothered with social media at all, to the extent when I was posting a poem a week on a Tuesday, bop, hitting the algorithm, it was going up to 40k, 50k. Oh, Dad, I'm famous.
Yeah.
And now, because I've completely, it's obsolete to me, and I put stuff out. Some of that, my best work, I definitely think is 100% the best stuff I've ever created, and it's the most me.
Yeah.
Has not been seen to as much of a degree.
Yeah, but that's not because of the work, is it? It's because of the algorithms. It's because of So how many times do you share a video of your poem or whatever, and it gets like 1 like or like 10 views or 100? It's shit, and you think the poem's shit.
Yeah.
And so I reckon in the last 2 years I've spent at least 1,000 hours just me and Microsoft Word.
Yeah.
No one telling me if it's good or not. You can go on Twitter and within 5 minutes, people go, that's good, that's good, that's good,
Yeah,
that's good.
yeah.
So where are you going to go? You're going to go to Twitter, right? So I totally get it. Like, I'm not lecturing people. I'm guilty of it myself. But as a writer, it's a particularly difficult tool because all you want is validation.
Yeah.
In it.
Well,
Do you know what I mean?
that's where I kind of got to with it is, do you know what? I've got to pick one or the other. There's some times where you go, well, this is going to be the byproduct of this. And if you really want to get engaged and do what you used to do, then you've got to really play to the tool and be involved with it and be constant with it. And I know how much that consumed me and how much that took away from me. So to go to the other side where I'm a bit more, do you know what? This is for me, genuinely. To leave on my YouTube forever and just sit there being proud of it, where it can evolve and I know I've done the right thing. I think that is where I found my solace with writing.
Yeah, totally.
Genuinely.
But then you spend 2 years not going on social media and crafting a perfect collection, and then you're like, well, how do I let people know about it?
There you go. Yeah, there you go.
So again, it's about balancing it. But
yeah, mate.
But then, you know, some people like Holly McNish, for example, millions and millions of views on some of her earlier videos. And that's not the only reason she's successful. But like Rupi Kaur, for example, fucking over 500,000 book sales, built it up through Instagram. So for some people, that is the thing. But like, you know, you just got to give it a go.
You find your way, don't you?
But the most important thing is the writing. If your writing's good and you believe in what you're doing, then you decide how you want to share it.
It's great conversations to have, though.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
From two poets sharing their journey with it and perspective with it.
We've gone from the BMP to Hootsuite.
Didn't you think it was always gonna, though?
Yeah.
I was quite sure.
Yeah.
I looked at us and I thought, now this is a journey. This is a magical bus.
Totally.
Honestly, mate, I've not seen you enough. That's what I've realised today. I've
yeah,
really,
it's been good, mate. It's been
I
good to
love
get
the
back together.
character. I love who you are. You're a wicked person, and I'm looking forward to coming and seeing you more. I'd love to get you on a
mate.
bus. Would you be up for it?
Yeah. We'll get it sorted.
Do you think we can bring the clan down?
Yeah,
the wild
definitely.
ones. We'll have a right night of it.
Yeah, I reckon so.
Mate, I'm coming up with a new concept. I want to do jazzy words.
All right.
Because I've got a lot of mates that are really into jazz music.
Yeah.
Do you know, it's very given to poetry, isn't it?
Yeah.
Anything, bongos, piano, what am I playing there?
Saxophone.
Yeah, there you go. I want to just bring loads of instruments
Yeah.
and then get the poets or the rappers and writers to pick who they want to put together and piece a band on stage.
Yeah.
And then come up and perform on there. So I'm going to get you down for that. That's my
good.
plan.
Sounds good.
Really appreciate it. Just let everybody know again in this camera here
All right.
where they can find all your stuff, everything you're about, everything you do.
mattaboutpoet.com.
That's
it.
On
That's all you need to
everything.
know. Well, it's mattaboutpoet.com, and then all my socials are at mattaboutpoet. Just Google mattaboutpoet.
You're going to find you.
Yeah.
Very Googleable, aren't you?
If you put poet after it, there's a lacrosse player called Matt Abbott who's more famous than me.
He's up there. Wow.
But if you put Matt Abbott poet,
yeah.
then I'm alright.
He's not good
I'm
poet,
the most
is he?
No, I'm the most famous poet called Matt Abbott. So it's all right.
Guys, you've been a part of the Old Farm Bus, Back of the Bus Sessions podcast. I'm going to leave you on this. I always do, and I always will. Just be nice to one another, you beautiful set of buggers. That's all you've got to do. Simples. Peace and love, man.
Cheers, mate. All the
Cheers.
best.